Hello, everybody. We are ready to continue on in our book, The Jungle Book. We are starting a new story today, and the story is called Tiger Tiger. You can follow along in your Bright Thinker. I put the PDF file in there. Or if you have the physical copy of this book, you can follow along on page 73, is where we will be starting. We have just left Mowgli where the first story leaves off, not the story of the monkey people, not the Banderlogs, but the very first story, Mowgli's brothers, where that story leaves off, and he's been banished from the jungle and from the pack. Excuse me. So he's left the jungle and he gets adopted in our story by a woman whose son was killed in the jungle by a tiger. At first, Mowgli has a little bit of difficulty adjusting to life in the village, but they allowed him to herd the buffalo, and that made him feel a lot more comfortable. During the several months that he was in the man's village, Mowgli spoke with Gray Brother, one of Mother Wolf's cubs, so one of his brothers. And Mowgli, at the end of this story, you'll find out what happens. I'm not going to share that with you yet. Um, at the very end of this story, Mowgli is forced to leave the village because the villagers believe that he's a sorcerer, and that he can talk to the animals and make them do his bidding, which actually is the truth. He can talk to the animals because he was trained well by Baloo. Mowgli returns to the jungle, and he does not want to be the leader of the wolf pack, although he is asked to be. But instead, he decides he just wants to hunt alone with the company of Baloo, Bagheera, and his wolf brothers. So that's what's happening in this story right now. We're on page 73. Tiger, Tiger. It starts out with a poem. What of the hunting, hunter bold? Brother, the watch was long and cold. What of the quarry you went to kill? Brother, he crops in the jungle still. Where is the power that made your pride? Brother, it ebbs from my flank and side. Where is the haste that you hurry by? Brother, I go to my lair to die. Now we must go back to the first tale when Mowgli left the wolf's cave after the fight with the pack at the Council Rock. He went down to the plowed lands where the villagers lived, but he would not stop there because it was too near to the jungle, and he knew that he had made at least one bad enemy at the council. So he hurried on, keeping to the rough road that ran down the valleys, and followed it at a steady jog trot for nearly 20 miles, till he came to a country that he did not know. The valley opened out into a great plain dotted over with rocks and cut up by ravines. At one end stood a little village, and at the other was a thick jungle came down. At the other end, a thick jungle came down to sweep to the grazing grounds, and it stopped there as though it had been cut off with a hoe. So what it's telling you is that there is a ravine, and at one end of the ravine is a village, and at the other end of the ravine is the thick jungle, and it just stops. The jungle just stops, like it was cut off with a hoe. All over the plain, cattle and buffalo were grazing, and when the little boys in charge of the herds saw Mowgli, they shouted and ran away. And the yellow pariah dogs that hung about every Indian village barked. Mowgli walked on, for he was feeling hungry, and when he came to the village gate, he saw the big thorn bush that was drawn up before the gate at twilight, and he pushed it to one side. "Oof," he said, for he had come across more than one such barricade in the night rambles after things to eat. So men are afraid of the people of the jungle here also. He sat down by the gate, and when a man came out, he stood up and opened his mouth and pointed down it to show that he wanted food. The man stared and ran back up the street of the village, shouting for the priest, who was big fat man dressed in white with a red and yellow mark on his forehead. The priest came to the gate, and with him at least 100 people who stared and talked and shouted and pointed at Mowgli. They have no manners, these menfolk, said Mowgli to himself. Only the gray ape would behave as they do. So he threw back his long hair and he frowned at the crowd. What is there to be afraid of? Said the priest. Look at the marks on his arms and legs. They are the bites of wolves. He is but a wolf child run away from the jungle. Of course, in playing together, the cubs had often nipped Mowgli harder than they intended, and there were white scars all over his arms and legs. But he would have been the last person in the world to call these bites, for he knew what real biting meant. "Arr, arr," said two or three women together. "To be bitten by wolves, the poor child! He is a handsome boy. He has eyes like red fire. By my honor, Mensua, he is not unlike the boy that was taken by the tiger." "Let me look," said a woman with heavy copper rings on her wrists and ankles, and she peered at Mowgli under the palm of her hand. "Indeed, he is not. He is thinner, but he has the look of my boy." The priest was a clever man, and he knew that Manusa was a wife to the richest villager in the place. So he looked up at the sky for a minute and then said solemnly, "What the jungle has taken, the jungle has restored. Take the boy into your house, my sister, and forget not to honor the priest who sees so far into the lives of men." "By the bull that bought me," said Mowgli to himself, "but all this talking is like another looking over by the pack. Well, if I am a man I must become." The crowd parted as the woman beckoned Mowgli to her hut, where there was a red lacquered bedstead, a great earthen grain chest with curious raised patterns on it, and half a dozen copper cooking pots. Also, an image of a Hindu god in a little alcove, and on the wall a real looking glass, such as they sell at the country fairs. She gave him a long drink of milk and some bread, and then she laid her hand on his head and looked into his eyes, for she thought that perhaps he might be her real son, come back from the jungle where the tiger had taken him. So she said, "Nathu, oh Nathu." Mowgli did not show that he knew that name. "Do you not remember the day when I gave you new shoes?" She touched his foot, and it was almost as hard as a horn. "No," she said sorrowfully, "those shoes have never worn shoes. But you are very much like my Nathu, and you shall be my son." Mowgli was uneasy, because he had never been under a roof before. But as he looked at the thatch, he thought that he could tear it out any time if he wanted to get away, and that the window had no fastenings. "What is the good of a man," he said to himself at last, "if he does not understand man's talk? Now I am as silly and as dumb as a man would be in the jungle. I must learn their talk." It was not for fun that he learned while he was with the wolves to imitate the challenge of the bucks in the jungle and the grunts of the little wild pig. So as soon as Manusa pronounced a word, Mowgli would imitate it almost perfectly, and before dark he had learned the names of many things in the hut. There was difficulty at bedtime because Mowgli would not sleep under anything that looked like a panther trap, as the hut, and when they shut the door he went through the window. "Give him his will," said Manusa's husband. Masua's husband. I'm sorry, I'm saying her name wrong. Masua's husband. "Remember, he can never till now have slept on a bed. If he is indeed sent in place of our son, he will not run away." So Mowgli stretched himself in some long, clean grass at the edge of the field, but before he closed his eyes, a soft gray nose poked him under the chin. "Phew!" said Gray Brother. He was the eldest of Mother Wolf's cubs. "That is a poor reward for following you 23 miles. You smell of wood smoke and cattle, altogether like a man already. Wake up, little brother, I bring news." "All are well in the jungle?" said Mowgli, hugging himself. "All except the wolves that were burned with the red flower. Now listen, Shere Khan has gone away to hunt far off till his coat grows again, for he is badly singed. When he returns, he swears that he will lay your bones in the Wankanuga. There are two words to that. I also have made that little promise. But news is always good. I am tired tonight, very tired with new things. Gray brother, but bring me the news always. You will not forget that you are a wolf? Men will not make you forget, said Gray Wolf anxiously. Never. I will always remember that I love you and all in our cave, but I will also always remember that I have been cast out of the pack. And you may be cast out of another pack. Men are only little men, are only men, little brother, and their talk is like the talk of the frogs in the pond. When I come down here again, I will wait for you in the bamboos at the edge of the grazing ground. For 3 months after that night, Mowgli hardly ever left the village gate, for he was so busy learning the ways and the customs of men. First, he had to wear a cloth around him, which annoyed him horribly. And then he had to learn about money, which he did not in the least bit understand, and about plowing, of which he did not see the use. Then the little children in the village made him very angry. Luckily, the law of the jungle had taught him to keep his temper, for in the jungle life and food depend on keeping your temper. But when they made fun of him because he would not play games or fly kites, or because he mispronounced some words, only the knowledge that it was unsportsmanlike to kill little naked cubs kept him from picking them up and breaking them in two. So they were making fun of him because he's mispronouncing words and he doesn't want to play their silly games. But he won't kill them because he knows that it is unsportsmanlike to kill little naked cubs. He did not know his own strength in the least. In the jungle, he knew he was weak compared with the beast, but in the village, the people said that he was as strong as a bull. And Mowgli had not the faintest idea of the difference that caste makes between a man and a woman, a man and a man, I'm sorry. When the potter's donkey slipped in the clay pit, Mowgli hauled it out by the tail and helped to stack the pocks for their journey to the market to Kanhiria. That was very shocking, too, for the potter is a low caste man and his donkey is worse. When the priest scolded him, Mowgli threatened to put him on the donkey too, and the priest told Messua's husband that Mowgli had better set to work as soon as possible. And the village headman told Mowgli that he would have to go out with the buffalo next day and herd them while they grazed. No one was more pleased than Mowgli, and that night, because he had been appointed, as it were, a servant of the village, he went off to a circle that met every evening on the masonry platform under the great fig tree. It was the village club, and the headman and the watchman and the barber, who knew all the gossip of the village, and the old Bulduo, the village hunter who owned a tower musket, met and smoked. The monkeys sat and talked in the upper branches, and there was a hole under the platform where a cobra lived, and he had a little platter of milk every night because he was sacred. And the old men sat around the trees and they talked, and they pulled at their hookahs, which were water pipes, till far into the night. They told wonderful tales of gods and men and ghosts, and Buldu- Bolduo told even more wonderful ones of the ways of the beasts of the jungle, till the eyes of the children sitting outside the circle bulged out of their heads. Most of the tales were about the animals, for the jungle was always at their door. The deer and the wild pig grubbed up their crops, and now and again the tiger carried off a man at twilight within sight of the village gates. Mowgli, who naturally knew something about what they were talking of, had to cover his face not to show that he was laughing, while Buduo, the tower musket across his knee, climbed on from one wonderful story to another, and Mowgli's shoulders shook. Bolduo was explaining how a tiger had carried away Messia's son was a ghost tiger, and that his body was inhabited by a ghost of the wicked old moneylender who had died some many years ago. And I know this is true, he said, because Poonrun Das always limped from the blow that he got in a riot when his account books were burned. And the tiger that I speak of, he limps too, for the tracks of his pads are unequal. True, true, that must be the truth, said the graybeards, nodding together. Are all these tales such cobwebs and moon talk? Said Mowgli. The tiger limps because he was born lame, as everyone knows. To talk of the soul of a monkey lender in a beast that never had the courage of a jackal is child's talk. Bulduo, Bulduo was speechless with surprise for a moment, and the headman stared. "Oh, oh, is it the jungle brat, is it?" said Bulduo. "If you are so wise, better bring his hide to Kanawiri, for the government has set 100 rupees on his life. Better still, do not talk when your elders speak." Mowgli rose to go. "All the evening I have lain here listening," he called back over his shoulder, "and except once or twice, Bulduo has not said one word of truth concerning the jungle, which is at his very doors. How then shall I believe the tales of the ghosts and the gods and the goblins which he says he has seen?" "It is full time that boy went to herding," said the headman, while Bulduo puffed and snorted at Mowgli's impertinence. The custom of most Indian villages is for a few boys to take the cattle and the buffalo out to graze in the early mornings and to bring them back at night. And the very cattle that would trample a white man to death allow themselves to be banged and bullied and shouted at by children that hardly come up to their noses. So long as the boys keep with the herds, they are safe, for not even a tiger will charge a mob of cattle. But if they straggle off to pick flowers or hunt lizards, they are sometimes carried off. Mowgli went through the village street in the dawn, sitting on the back of Rama, the great herd bull, and the slaty blue buffaloes with their long, backward sweeping horns and savage eyes rose out of their briars one by one and followed him. And Mowgli made it very clear to the children with him that he was the master. He beat the buffaloes with a long, polished bamboo and told Kemra, one of the boys, to graze the cattle by themselves while he went on with the buffalo, and to always be very careful not to stray from the herd. An Indian grazing ground is all rocks and shrub and tuskets and little ravines among which the herds scatter and disappear. The buffaloes generally keep to the pools and the muddy places where they lie wallowing or basking in the warm mud for hours. Mowgli drove them on to the edge of the plain where the Wananuga River came out of the jungle, and then he dropped from Rama's neck, trotted off to a bamboo clump, and found Gray Brother. Ah, said Gray Brother, I have waited here very many days. What is the meaning of this cattle herding work? It is in order, said Mowgli. I am a village herd for a while. What news of Shere Khan? He has come back to this country and has waited here a long time for you. Now he has gone off again, for the game is scarce. But he means to kill you. Very good, said Mowgli. So long as he away, do you or one of the four brothers sit on that rock so that I can see as I come out of the village. I can see you as I come out of the village. And when he comes back, wait for me in the ravine by the dakh tree in the center of the plain. We need not walk into Shere Khan's mouth. Then Mowgli picked out a shady place and lay down and slept while the buffalo grazed around him. Herding in India is one of the laziest things in the world. The cattle move and crunch and lie down and move on again, and they do not even low. They only grunt, and the buffalo very seldom say anything, but get down into the muddy pools one after another and work their way into the mud till only their nose and staring china blue eyes show above the surface, and there they lie like logs. The sun makes the rocks dance in the heat, and the herd children hear one kite, never any more, whistling almost out of sight overhead. And they know if they ever died, or a cow died, that kite would sweep down, and the next kite miles away would see him drop and would follow, and the next, and the next. And almost before they were dead, there would be a score of hungry kites come out of nowhere. Then they would sleep and wake and sleep again in the weaved little baskets of dried grass and put grasshoppers in them, or catch two praying mantises and make them fight, or string a necklace of red and black jungle nuts, or watch a lizard basking on a rock, or a snake hunting frogs near the wallows. Then they sing long, long songs with odd native quavers at the end of them, and the day seems longer than most people's whole lives. And perhaps they make a mud castle with their mud fingers of men and horses and buffaloes, and put reeds into the men's hand and pretend that they are kings, and the figures are their armies, or that they are gods to be worshipped. Then evening comes, and the children call, and the buffaloes lumber up out of the sticky mud with their noise, like gunshots going off one after another. And then they all string across the green plain back to the twinkling village lights. That's as far as we're going to read today. Go ahead and set that aside. Whoops, I better get to our questions, right? All righty. Why was it difficult for Mowgli to stay inside the man's hut? It seemed like a leopard trap, didn't it? It seemed like a panther trap. He was a little concerned about it being a trap. He had never before been inside where something had been over his head while he tried to sleep. Why did Mesua adopt Mowgli? That's right. Her own son had been carried off by a tiger, and she thought it might be Mowgli, but she called him by a different name, and he didn't recognize it because remember when he was taken away, when When his parents ran off, when Shere Khan chased his parents off, and then Mowgli escaped to the wolf pack, he was very, very small. He was only not even 2 years old, so he probably would not remember. How did Mowgli find out what was happening in the jungle? That's right. Gray Brother came to him with news every day of what was happening in the jungle. But he didn't get the news every day. Remember, there were a few months, probably 3 months, I think it said, that he didn't go out into the jungle. But whenever he went out there, Gray Brother had the news of the jungle for him. How did the other children treat Mowgli? They were mean to him. They called him names and they made fun of him when he mispronounced words, and they made fun of him and teased him when he wouldn't play their silly games. Why didn't he get angry with them and destroy them? Because the law of the jungle said he could not. He was not allowed to attack a naked cub, as they are called. What job was given to Mowgli? The job a herder. He was to herd the cattle and the buffalo. That was his job. Do you think he's going to do the job well? Why do you think that? I think you're right. He can talk to animals, so he's probably going to be able to do the job very well because although he won't be able to talk to the buffalo and the cattle because he didn't learn their language, he can talk to the other animals that are all around them. All right, let's go ahead and take a few notes, not very many, on this story, this portion of our story. Put your heading, which is your name, the date, which is 5/17/21, and the lesson. The lesson is Tiger, Tiger. Tiger, Tiger, Tiger. All right, let's start out with Gray Wolf. Go ahead and write that down. Gray Wolf. No, Gray Brother. Sorry, almost said the wrong thing. Gray Brother. Let me see our definition of Gray Brother. I'm in the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. I'm in the right spot. Oh no. If it loads, there we go. It's loading. Okay, Gray Brother. Gray Brother, what we're going to put is told Mowgli what was happening in the jungle. Say it. Told Mowgli what was happening in the jungle. Say it. Told Mowgli what was happening in the jungle. Say it as you're writing it. Told Mowgli what was happening in the jungle. That's Gray Brother. The next person we're going to write down is Mesua. Her name is spelled mess at E, Sue, vowel in an open syllable, A. Mesue, Mesua. Adopted Mowgli since she was her son. Say it. Adopted Mowgli since she lost her son. Say it. Adopted Mowgli since she lost her son. Say it as you're writing it down. Adopted Mowgli since she lost her son, who might have been Mowgli. We don't know for sure. Okay. The next one is Bull, Bull, Buldeo. Buldeo. And it's spelled bull, D, vowel in an open syllable. Oh, Buldeo. Okay. Tried to, oops. Buldeo is the mighty hunter. Say it. Mighty hunter. Say it. The mighty hunter. The mighty hunter. All righty. The next thing we're going to write down is the village children. Let's go ahead and just put that as our heading. Well, let's write this down. Village children treat Mowgli badly. Say it. Village children treat Mowgli badly. Say it. Village children treat Mowgli badly. Say it as you're writing it down. That's a bullet point. Village children treat Mowgli badly. All right, next bullet point. He does not kill them because they are naked cubs. Say it. He does not kill them because they are naked cubs. Say it. He does not kill them because they are naked cubs. Say it as you write it down. Mowgli is who we mean. Mowgli does not kill them when they're teasing him because they are naked cubs. And remember, it's against the law of the jungle to kill a naked cub. It's unsportsmanlike, is what he says. It's unsportsmanlike to kill them. All righty. And I believe that that is all we're going to write down for today. Well, actually, let's add that. It is unsportsmanlike. Say it. It is unsportsmanlike. Say it. It is unsportsmanlike. Say it as you're writing it down. It is unsportsman like. It's all one word, unsportsmanlike, to kill them. All right, I'm going to show you my notes. If you need to pause the video so that you can make sure you have the notes, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, let it keep running, and we'll be back tomorrow with some more Tiger. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.